The detail that matters is very small. It is a piece of plastic, approximately 3 inches long and 1 inch wide, printed with black ink on a white background. It contains a name, a date of birth, a patient identification number, and a unit designation. It was printed at 12:47 p.m. on a Tuesday at the third-floor outpatient clinic of St. Anselm's Regional Hospital in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It was placed on a wrist at 12:51 p.m. and has not been removed. It is a patient wristband. There are 43 of them in the building right now. The armed team that takes the building at 8:53 p.m. has seen dozens of them across the previous hours. They are part of the visual landscape of a hospital, present and meaning exactly what they always mean and therefore invisible. This one is different. Not in how it looks. Not in what it says. It is different in who is wearing it, and why, and what that person is doing right now, which is lying very still in the bed by the window of room 714 on the 7th floor, while the team leader stands 8 feet away looking at the corridor and deciding this room is exactly where he wants to be. Her name is Mara Sells. She is 39 years old. She is the charge nurse of the 7th floor cardiac recovery unit. She has worked this exact floor for 6 years. She knows every bed, every door, every circuit breaker, every piece of equipment, every staff member, every patient currently assigned to this ward. She knows the unit's emergency oxygen system runs on a separate circuit from the main power. She knows the internal patient call system runs on a separate circuit from the external communications. She knows these things because she is the person who made sure the hospital knew them, in 2 separate safety reviews, across 6 years of running this floor. Before this story breaks your heart and rebuilds it again, please subscribe to this channel, ring that bell, and drop a comment below telling me which town or city you're listening from tonight. I read every single one. She is wearing a patient wristband because she had a procedure at lunch. She is in a hospital gown because the attending physician insisted. She is in room 714 because it was the nearest available bed on the nearest available floor, and she intended to sleep for 90 minutes and walk back to the nurse's station at 4 p.m. She did not walk back at 4 p.m. She is still in the bed when the team leader sweeps the room. He looks at her for 4 seconds. He sees woman gown, IV line, wristband, eyes at half-mast. He categorizes her, automatically, efficiently, correctly by every measure of the evidence available to him, as a non-ambulatory patient. Non-threatening, irrelevant to the operation. He looks away. He has made the only mistake that will matter tonight. 2:47 p.m., 8 hours earlier. The procedure was minor, a gastroscopy, the kind that takes 35 minutes, that Mara had been advised to have for 18 months, that she had rescheduled 4 times because the floor needed her and the timing was never right. She finally scheduled it during a Tuesday lunch break in February, because February is the slowest month in cardiac recovery, and Dr. Osei, the attending who had been telling her to do this since last spring, happened to have a cancellation. She told nobody on the floor she was going. She would be back before the afternoon shift change. She did not want the staff to think she was less available than she was. This was a habit of hers that Dr. Osei had commented on, and that her ex-husband had commented on at greater length, and that Mara had filed under things that were probably true, and that she was not ready to change. The procedure was straightforward. She came out of the mild sedation in 40 minutes, clear-headed, already reaching for her phone to check the floor's status. Dr. Osei took the phone from her hand. 4 hours, he said. I have a shift, she said. You have a charge nurse who has covered for you before, and will cover for you for 4 more hours, he said. You have mild dehydration. You have a blood pressure I want to monitor, and you are going to lie in a bed and do nothing for the next 4 hours, she said. The nearest available bed is on the 7th floor, he said. Then you can walk there in 40 seconds. I'll have someone bring a chair, she said. I'm not sitting in a chair in my own unit, he said. Then you can lie in whatever bed they have available. Room 714 is empty, I believe. She went to room 714. She put on the gown because the protocol required it, and Mara was a person who followed protocol, even when applied to her. She let the nurse on duty start the IV, because the nurse on duty was Dominic, who had worked with her for 7 years and who would tell Dr. Osei immediately if she refused. She picked up a tablet and started reviewing charts. She was going to get some work done. That was fine. That was not the same as being on duty. She fell asleep at 3:47 p.m. with the tablet on her chest and the chart for the patient in room 709 still open on the screen. Nobody woke her. Nobody thought. Mara in a bed was strange, but Mara asleep was Mara's own business, and the floor ran fine without her for 90 minutes, and then ran fine for another hour, and then the evening settled into its normal Tuesday rhythm, and nobody went to check on the charge nurse in 714, because nobody expected her to still be there. She was still there. She was still there at 8:47 p.m. when she came back to full wakefulness with the specific alertness of someone who has not been deeply asleep and whose system does not waste time on the transition between states. She reached for the tablet. She heard the stairwell door. The man who leads the team is named Callum. He is 44. He has a background that his clients do not ask about in detail, because the details are not useful to them. What is useful to them is his record, which is 8 completed operations across the past 6 years with no loss of life, including the client's target assets, and no attribution. He is expensive. He is worth the expense. The objective tonight: the hospital's pathology archive on the 4th floor. Specifically, a set of physical tissue samples and accompanying records that belong to a man whose identity will not be named here, because naming it would require a separate document entirely. The samples and records exist in physical form, because the man who is paying Callum's fee ensured, 3 years ago, that they were never digitized. Physical evidence in a hospital archive is easier to make disappear than digital records, provided you have access. Getting access to a locked hospital archive requires controlling the building. Callum did not plan a massacre. This is important. His plan involved minimal contact, no civilian casualties, a window of 2 to 3 hours in which the hospital operated in a constrained state before the external response could be coordinated, and an exit that left the hostages unharmed and the team unidentified. This was not charity, it was operational hygiene. Dead civilians created investigations. Alive and frightened civilians created paperwork. Paperwork could be managed. He had surveilled the hospital for 6 weeks. He knew the 7th floor because the 7th floor was directly above the 4th, and the service routes between floors were relevant to his exit. He chose room 714 as his command post because it had a corner window, sightlines to both corridor ends, and contained, when he swept it, what appeared to be a sleeping cardiac patient who would require no management. He had been thorough. He had been professional. He had made one error. He did not read the wristband. 8:53 p.m. The building. The team entered through 3 points simultaneously: the service entrance on the ground floor, the parking structure, stairwell on the east side, and the loading dock at the rear. They had 4 minutes of overlap before the 7th floor was secured. They used 3 minutes and 50 seconds. Mara heard the floor change before she saw it. She had been the charge nurse here for 6 years. She knew the sound of this floor at rest, and she knew the sound of it disturbed. And the thing she heard at 8:53 was neither. It was the sound of a floor being controlled, which was a category she knew from a period of her life that this floor did not know about. She had 6 seconds between hearing the stairwell door and the first figure appearing at the entrance to the cardiac corridor. She used those 6 seconds to make 3 decisions. The first decision: do not move. Whatever is happening, she is more useful in this bed than out of it. A nurse in scrubs in a corridor is a staff member, identifiable, manageable, a known quantity. A patient in a bed is furniture. The second decision: do not close her eyes completely. Half-mast. the appearance of someone between sleep and waking, aware of her surroundings in a general way, non-responsive in a specific way. She had managed patients in this state for years. She could perform it. The third decision: listen to everything. She lay back. She let her hands relax. She watched Callum enter room 714 through her eyelashes. He was in the room for 4 seconds. He looked at the window. Yes, checked. He looked at both corridor sightlines, confirmed. He looked at her, gown, IV wristband, eyes half closed. And she felt the weight of his assessment and held herself completely still under it, the way she had learned to hold still under things that required stillness, a long time ago, in circumstances she had not thought about in 3 years. He called the room clear. He moved to the window. Maricels exhaled through her nose, slow, controlled, and began to work. At Part 3. Maricels, the actual biography. She grew up in New Orleans, the second of 4 children, in a household where her mother was a home health aide, and her father drove long freight, and the space between those two professions, the care and the logistics, the human and the mechanical, described, without either of them knowing it, exactly what their second daughter would become. She enlisted at 19, not nursing, not yet. She went in as a combat medic, and then, because she was very good at it, she was recruited into a special operations support role that is not described in detail in her service record, because the record has sections that are still classified and will remain so. She did 2 tours. In her second tour, she was involved in a hostage rescue operation, not as a combatant, technically, though the technical distinction had become fairly academic by the point at which the operation reached its conclusion. She was 24. She was the youngest person in the team, and the only one who had managed to get a medical assessment of the hostages before the breach, because she had convinced the team leader that she could pass as a local health worker, and he, after 40 seconds of looking at her, had agreed. She left the military at 26. She got her nursing degree at 29. She chose cardiac recovery because it was the specialization that required the most sustained attention, not the dramatic interventions of emergency medicine, but the long vigilance, the monitoring of trajectories, the specific intelligence of knowing a patient's baseline well enough to detect the deviation before it became a crisis. This was the kind of medicine she was good at. It was also, she had come to understand the kind of person she was. She had been charge nurse on the 7th floor since she was 33. In 6 years, she had not lost a patient to a preventable cause. This was not luck. It was the product of a specific quality of attention that the floor's staff had learned to trust completely, and that the patients experienced as warmth, which it partly was, and partly something colder and more precise. She had not thought about the special operations support role in 3 years. She thought about it now, lying in a hospital bed in a hospital gown with an IV in her arm, while an armed team secured the floor she ran, and she found that the thinking was very clear. The way thinking is clear when it has been well kept, even in storage. The way a thing does not disappear simply because you stop using it. She thought, I know this building better than anyone in it, including the people who surveilled it for 6 weeks. She thought, the wristband is an advantage I have until the moment it stops being one. She thought, the medication in the crash cart at the nurse's station and Mr. Arsenyuk's in the corner, whose color is not right, whose chart she reviewed 40 minutes ago, who needs his 9 o'clock intervention at 9 o'clock. She thought, first things first. The hostages in room 714 settled into the specific state that people settle into when they are frightened and there is nothing immediately to be done about it. A kind of suspended vigilance, the body alert and the mind cycling. Mara watched them without appearing to watch them. 6 staff members, 2 mobile patients. She identified each person, assessed their current state, cataloged what they could be counted on for if the situation required something of them. Dominic, steady, experienced, will follow a lead without explanation if the lead is clear. Priya, frightened but not frozen. The fear is making her more focused, not less. The two patients, one ambulatory and angry, which was useful energy if channeled correctly, one not ambulatory but calm, which meant they would not create a problem. Callum stood at the window. The second guard stood at the door. Between their rotation of attention, there was a gap, not large, not reliable, but present. Mara began mapping it. Priya settled onto the floor beside the bed. Mara could see her from the corner of her eye. Priya knew exactly who was in that bed. Mara could see the knowledge on her face, the confusion of it, the way Priya's mouth kept starting to open. Mara moved her hand under the sheet, slow, undetectable from across the room. She found Priya's hand on the floor beside the bed. She squeezed it once. Hard. A specific squeeze, not comfort, instruction. Priya's hand went still. Her mouth closed. Good. Mara let her eyes drift to Mr. Arsnox. He was in the far corner, 71 years old, 2 days post-cardiac catheterization, on a medication regimen that had a window. She had reviewed his chart at 3:47 p.m. He was due for an intervention at 9 p.m. It was now 9:03 p.m. She watched his color. She watched his breathing. She made a decision. Part 4. The Call Button. The internal patient call system at St. Anselm's Regional runs on a dedicated circuit. It does not share infrastructure with the external phone system, the wireless network, or the emergency communication channels. This is true of most modern hospitals and is a standard safety feature. If the main communications go down, patients can still summon help. Mara had argued for the dedicated circuit in the 2021 safety review. She had written the proposal herself. She knew the circuit number, the maintenance access point, and the exact locations of every call button and indicator light on the 7th floor. She pressed the button, not the emergency call. The standard patient call, the single press that illuminates a light at the nurse's station and produces a soft chime. The kind of call a patient makes when they need water, or a blanket adjusted, or a nurse's attention for something that is not urgent. She pressed it 3 times. Short, long. Callum did not react. He did not know what the light at the nurse's station meant. The guard he had posted there did not know what it meant. But there was a man sitting on the floor of the nurse's station who knew exactly what it meant, who had been reading that pattern for 7 years. Dominic looked at the indicator panel. He looked at it for 1 second. Then he said, to the guard standing over him, "That's a cardiac patient." Short, long is the cardiac distress pattern. The patient in that room has a post-cath complication. The guard said, "Don't touch anything." Dominic said, "If I don't respond to that call, the patient may develop a serious cardiac event." In a building where you have already restricted access to emergency services. He said it with the flat, informational tone of someone who was not making a threat, who was simply presenting facts. That becomes a very different kind of problem for everyone in this building, including you. The guard keyed his radio. Callum, in room 714, received the communication. He looked at the room. He looked at the man in the corner. He had already identified Mr. Arsnox as the oldest and most visibly unwell of the room's occupants, which meant the call was plausible. He thought for 4 seconds. He told the guard to allow the nurse to respond. Dominic came to room 714 with the crash cart. He assessed Mr. Arsnox. He administered the intervention. He did it correctly, efficiently, without a single unnecessary motion. And Mara watched him from the bed with the specific quality of attention she gave to every nurse she trained, checking each step against her own knowledge of what the step required, finding no errors. She felt something that was not quite pride and not quite relief. The closest word was trust. She had trusted Dominic with this floor for 7 years. He was answering that trust in a room with armed men in it. Mr. Arsnox's color improved. He looked at Dominic. He said, "Thank you, son." Dominic said, "Rest." He began to push the crash cart out. He passed the bed. He did not look at Mara, but his hand moving past the bed rail tapped the rail once. A single quiet tap. "I see you." "I know." Callum watched him go. He was recalculating. Mara could see it in the way he stood, the slight change in his orientation. A patient in active medical distress, was a variable he had absorbed and managed. But the management had required him to allow a staff member into the room, to allow the crash cart, to allow a reminder that the people in this building were not simply obstacles, but patients with medical trajectories that did not pause for his operation. He was not rattled. But he was aware that he was in a hospital in a way he had not been before. Mara filed this. Part 5. The photograph. The team member at the nurse's station was named, among themselves, 6. He was methodical. He had been tasked with going through the charge nurse's office adjacent to the station, specifically looking for the building's communications schematics, the circuit diagram, the security override documentation that Callum wanted access to. He found the circuit diagram. He found the security documentation. He found on the desk in a small frame beside the monitor a photograph. The photograph showed a woman in scrubs, smiling at something off camera. She was wearing the lanyard of the St. Anselm's Cardiac Recovery Unit. Below the photograph, a desk nameplate, Mara Sells, RN, Charge Nurse, Cardiac Recovery, 70th floor. 6 looked at the photograph. He looked down the corridor toward room 714. He thought about the woman in the bed, the gown, the IV, the wristband, the eyes at half-mast. He picked up the photograph. He keyed his radio. He turned slowly, not in alarm. Callum did not alarm. He turned with the deliberate pace of someone who was making a decision about what he was about to look at and how he was going to look at it. He looked at the bed. She looked back at him. There was a silence in room 714 that the other occupants felt, without fully understanding. The kind of silence that has a specific pressure to it, not the absence of sound, but the presence of two people assessing each other at a speed and depth that has no visible indicator. Mara Sells, he said. Yes, she said. He looked at the wristband, then back at her face. How long, he said, not a question about how long she had been awake, but about how long she had been doing what she had been doing from that bed. Since you cleared the room, she said. He processed this. 8 feet away from him, in a hospital bed, in a hospital gown, a woman who had been running a covert operational assessment of his team's deployment since the moment he entered. He looked at the crash cart situation with new understanding. He looked at the hostages on the floor with new understanding. He looked at the nursing aide's hand positioned beside the bed and understood that the communication passing through the floor had not been accidental. The call button, he said. Separate circuit, she said. I put it in the 2021 safety review. He looked at her for a long moment. What do you want? He said, which was not the question of a man demanding terms. It was the question of a professional who had been outmaneuvered and was taking stock. My patience, she said. That's all I have ever wanted tonight. Give me my patience and walk out of here with whatever you came for, and I will tell the responding officers that the situation resolved before their arrival. That's the second time I've heard that offer tonight, he said, not to her, almost to himself. Someone used it at a building in Portland. She did not know what that meant. She did not ask. The archive, she said, 4th floor. Whatever is in it, I don't care about it. I am not the police. I am a nurse. I care about the 14 patients on this floor and the 6 staff members sitting on that floor. She held his gaze. None of them are what you came for. Take what you came for and go. He looked at her. She looked back. She did not look away. Part 6, the rest. He went. Not immediately. Callum was not a man who moved immediately in response to anything. He waited. He ran the options. He had the archive access he had come for, obtained in the previous hour by a team member she had not known about on the 4th floor. He had the objective. What he did not have was the operational picture he had planned. His command post was compromised. His hostage assets had been managed by someone who should have been a non-factor, and the building's medical situation had produced at least one dynamic he had not pre-planned for. He made the practical decision. He told his team to pull. He walked to the door of room 714. He stopped. He said, the wristband was good. She said nothing. She watched him leave. It took 11 minutes for the floor to understand that the team had gone. 11 minutes of silence that felt like a held breath. And then released all at once, not in chaos, but in the specific sound a floor makes when it comes back to itself. Voices, movement, the monitors that had been muted being turned back on, someone crying somewhere down the corridor, someone else telling them it was all right. Mara got out of the bed. She pulled the IV line. She took the gown off in the bathroom and put on the spare set of scrubs from her locker that Priya brought without being asked. She stood at the nurse's station for the first time in 6 hours. She picked up the patient status board. She began her rounds. The police arrived at 10:41 p.m. The detective who took her statement, a patient man named Broussard, who had been doing this long enough to recognize a statement that was complete and a statement that was strategically edited, and to understand that pressing the difference in this particular case was not going to be productive, wrote down what she gave him and did not ask what she did not offer. What she did not offer. The specifics of the half hour before Callum discovered who she was. The nature of the preparations she had made from the bed. The conversation at the door. These were things that would create questions she did not want to answer. And the floor was safe, and the patients were stable, and the team was gone, and the things that would be gained by answering those questions were smaller than the things that would be lost. She signed the statement. She thanked Detective Broussard. She went back to the floor. She dropped it in the bin on the way past. Dominic found it there the next morning when he was cleaning the room 714, which had been returned to its ordinary function, which was holding patients who needed cardiac recovery on the 7th floor of a hospital in Baton Rouge. He picked it up. He read it. He put it in his pocket. He kept it. He was not sure why. Perhaps because it was the specific object that had, by its existence on a specific wrist at a specific moment, made everything that happened that night possible. Perhaps because the distance between what it said, patient name unit, room number, and what the person wearing it actually was a kind of gap he wanted to remember. The size of the gap between what people see and what is actually there. He had worked with Mara Sells for 7 years. He had thought he knew most of what there was to know about her. The wristband, small and white and ordinary in his palm, suggested that he had known the parts she had chosen to show him. That there were other parts, and that they were not less real for being unshown, and that those parts had been available on a Tuesday night in February when the building needed them. He was on shift the next morning when she came in at 7. She set her coffee down. She picked up the patient board. She did not mention the previous night. She was the charge nurse. The floor needed running. She ran it. At some point in the morning, he was not sure exactly when, he realized that this was the truest thing about Mara Sells. Not the other thing, the thing the previous night had revealed, though that was real and he was still absorbing it. The truest thing was this: she came back. Every morning she came back. She picked up the board. She ran the floor. She was the charge nurse. That was not a role she performed. It was what she was. The wristband said, patient. The wristband was wrong. As wristbands, as all small official categories applied to complicated human beings, sometimes are. If you love this type of intense nurse-taking action tales, hit that like button. Share the video with your fellow thrill seekers, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you never miss a new story.